The title of this talk, which is the first talk in a series called Dharma for Difficult Times, is the uses of adversity. That comes from a Shakespeare quotation. Sweet are the uses of adversity, which, like a toad, ugly and venomous, wears yet a jewel in his head, from As You Like It. So adversity can have its uses. I mean, there's a lot of it about, and we're not saying that this is a good thing in any way, but we sort of have a choice about how we respond. We can use this as an opportunity to deepen and strengthen our practice. There's a line in the mind training tradition we looked at not that long ago. Use adversity as the path to practice. So we can do that. In fact, without a certain amount of adversity, we're not going to be able to practice. I mean, we looked at the wheel of life over the last few weeks, and we heard how, rather surprisingly, the God realm, where everything is wonderful and it's just these refined pleasures all the time and no suffering, that is not a good place for gaining enlightenment. The human realm, with a manageable amount of suffering, is a much better place. Now, for some people, the suffering may not be manageable. But for a lot of us, it's we're experiencing adversity, but it's not overwhelming. And talking to different people, there's obviously a lot of different ways in which we're experiencing adversity. So there are some people who are really cooped up at quite close quarters with quite a lot of people, and other people who are suffering isolation and lonely. We can't do the things we usually do. We can't have the things we usually have. We can't eat what we usually eat, probably. There's separation from those we care about. We're cut off from the Sangha, but we're also cut off from other friends and relatives. For some of us, there's financial loss, financial insecurity, and there's certainly a lot of insecurity about the future. And for some of us, especially the more vulnerable among us, a lot of fear and anxiety. So yeah, there's adversity, but we can use that. So I think the question I'd pose to you is, well, what opportunity to transcend my old ways of being does the adversity give me? So I'm going to structure this around talking about that, around ethics, meditation, and wisdom, the threefold path. So what opportunities does this situation, terrible as it is for many, many people, but what opportunities does it give me to practice the positive precepts? First of all, what opportunity does it give me for deeds of loving kindness or for developing kindness? So, well, for those of us who are sort of confined all the time with the same people in a limited space, well, there's plenty of kindness involved in just checking our reactivity, actually, checking that sort of irritation. We can tread on each other's toes, we're in each other's space much more than we usually are. And there's a real practice there in just kindness and non-reactivity towards those we're forced to live in such close quarters with. And generosity, well, generosity obviously overlaps very strongly with kindness, but we can also be generous in forgiving others that we're in close quarters with for their irritability and their reactivity. We just need to keep stepping back. When we do sort of snap or whatever, just step back, apologize, and forgive other people when they do that. And yeah, just recognize that it can be quite trying. And then, of course, there's also, for those of us who are not at great risk from this virus, incredible opportunities for generosity, incredible opportunities for generosity, ranging from delivering food to people who need it, to volunteering for the NHS. I mean, the scope for generosity is very, very large. So the third precept, stillness, simplicity, and contentment. Well, some of us, not all of us, but some of us, have a lot more space. A lot of the usual things we do, we can't do. There's a lot of space, and as Edward said earlier, that can be perceived as trying. But we can use that space. Instead of finding that space a problem, we can use that space to practice stillness, to enjoy the simple things, to watch the spring come, to watch the sky, to listen to music, to read poetry and think about it. Just to give ourselves the space that we often don't have in our lives. I mean, often people's lives have very, very little space. We're addicted to sort of activity and input. So even when we're not at work doing things in front of a computer screen very often, we fill our time with busyness of one sort or another, input of one sort or another. We've got a real opportunity here to practice some more stillness. And then simplicity and contentment. We can't get everything we want. Well, how about practicing being content with what we can get? Content with what's available. Yeah, if we can't get what we like or what we're used to, well, hey, it's a really serious Buddhist practice to not have everything we like, to free ourselves a bit from the sort of tyranny of our desires and our likes and dislikes, which are fairly sort of arbitrary, really. So instead of making this a problem that we can't get what we like and we can't get what we're used to, and sometimes even we can't get what we think we need, make that a practice. Embrace it as a practice. I suppose that's a bit of a theme of this talk, is embracing things as a practice rather than seeing it as a problem. So we can embrace the fact that we can't get what we want as a practice. And we could also make that an opportunity to just carry that on and embrace living a simpler life, disentangling ourselves, freeing ourselves from consumerism, from the sort of tyranny of consumerism that many of us, you know, Buddhists or not Buddhists, we're quite engaged often with the consumer society. We could live far simpler lives. I mean, I include myself in that. We could live far simpler lives. I could live a far simpler life. So there's a sort of opportunity here to disentangle ourselves a bit from that consumer society, to, as I say, embrace that as a practice and keep it going, keep it going. And by the way, if we're concerned about environmental issues, that's also the best thing we can do for the environment, to live that simpler life. So yeah, that's the first three positive precepts. The fourth, truthful communication. Well, once again, if we're living in close proximity with people, spending a lot of time with the same people, how about using that enforced confinement to communicate more deeply? To communicate more deeply with the people we live with, to really talk about what matters to us, and to listen to others, to hear what they have to say, to just talk on a different level, perhaps, than sort of perhaps slightly superficial level that we often do. So deepen our relationships with honesty and self-revelation. And it occurs to me that we could even make a formal space for this. So in Triratna communities, there's a community night. So we have a regular community night, where that, you know, part of the aim of that would be to deepen our communication, come together as a community. Well, we could do that in families as well. We could have a community night where we report in, where we talk about what's going on for us, and just generally increase the depth and the honesty of our communication. And then finally, going through the positive precepts to round off the ethics aspect of how we could use this practice. Well, mindfulness. If we're in that rather lucky position of not being able to do a lot of things that we normally do, we could use that extra time, that absence of the old routines, to practice mindfulness. As I said earlier, to watch the spring come, to watch the sky, spend time looking at the world, listening to the world, and listening to our own mental states. I mean, somebody said to me just the other day, because I'm not so busy, I've actually become much more aware of my mental states. So we can use the space, if we're lucky enough to have that space, to practice mindfulness. And of course, part of that would be to do more meditation if we have got that space, using it for more meditation. This is an opportunity, I think, where we can really put a lot more oomph into our meditation practice. We could spend more time at it. If we live in a situation where actually it's a bit too crowded and a bit too busy, well, the mindfulness of breathing can provide a wonderful escape, if you like. It can provide a wonderful holiday in a higher, more spacious realm than our crowded house. So it could be very, very pleasant. So why not do it? Why not do more meditation, more mindfulness and breathing? But particularly when it comes to the metta bhavana, I think we've got a real opportunity to make our practice a lot more powerful, a lot more real. It's a very difficult situation. Some people are really suffering. There's people we're really concerned about. Many people are anxious or suffering, and we can use that in our metta practice. We can use that in our metta practice to really make it more vivid and powerful, bringing people to mind in a more vivid and powerful way, in a way that perhaps when everything's going well, we're sort of, may they be happy, may they be well, but it doesn't seem so urgent. It seems much more urgent now. And actually, several people have told me over the last couple of weeks that this has really changed their metta practice. Somebody was saying just yesterday to me that they really hadn't got on with the metta bhavana at all. They were practicing for years and years and years and years and hadn't got on with the metta bhavana at all. Found it very difficult. Did it, but found it difficult. But then this situation and just being made aware of how others are suffering has just really made that much more powerful, much more real. So yeah, we can call to mind others suffering, and we can also use our own suffering to the extent that we are suffering to connect with others. We're all in the same boat. This makes us very, very aware that we're all in the same boat. I think it can give us a real sense of solidarity with others. That, yeah, it's part of the human condition. We suffer. And I may be suffering. There will be those who are suffering loads worse than me. People in much worse situations than me. Yeah, so, I mean, somebody mentioned a sort of example of this own situation. For example, they were saying that they work with a client group who actually are at danger of dying from distress. And obviously the person's aware of that, but suddenly the fact that they might also be in danger of dying of respiratory distress. I mean, this sounds quite extreme, but it suddenly means that, wow, I know what those people are facing. I really can feel for those people much more strongly. And of course, just at a much lower level than that, I'm going stir crazy. Well, I can make that a problem, or I can sit down and meditate and think, well, may all those other people out there who are going a bit stir crazy in the same boat as me, may we all be well, may we all be happy, may we all progress. So it gives us that opportunity to bring a real element of compassion into our metta bhavana practice, but also mudita, and also sympathetic joy, or joy in other people's positive qualities. There are people out there who are giving their time and indeed risking their health to help others in a really heroic way. Loads of volunteering going on, and then people working in the National Health Service, etc. People going back into work in the National Health Service, people volunteering too. It's bringing out some of the best in human nature, and well, we can bring that into our practice when we think may these beings be well. Aren't they wonderful? Some of them, aren't they great? So we can bring mudita and rejoicing in others into our practice. So for all these reasons, I think we can make our practice much more vivid in these difficult times. Then sometimes it can be when things are easy, it all just seems a bit pale and not that vivid. And finally, when I'm talking about meditation and talking about the metta bhavana in particular, I'd like to recommend the approach that Maitridasa talked about last week, which is seeing the metta bhavana as a form of prayer. We may think that Buddhists are not supposed to pray. And we may sort of sneer at the idea that doing the metta bhavana can have any real effect. It's just about me developing my positive mental states. But if we do it like that, it's not going to be very vivid. It's not going to be very powerful. I'd suggest forgetting all that. I'd suggest forgetting the idea that Buddhists aren't supposed to pray and forgetting any sort of rational doubts we might have about how it could work, and having some faith that we aren't just generating nice feelings for ourselves when we do the metta bhavana, which isn't very motivating, that when we generate a really strong desire for somebody's well-being, we are actually benefiting them. We are actually benefiting them. And not only are we actually benefiting them, we're actually invoking higher these forces, deeper forces beyond our conscious mind that genuinely do benefit this person. Blessing them, if you like. We're invoking higher forces. So we can have a real effect. So I would say, don't be prejudiced about this. I don't prejudge on the basis of assumptions that this could not possibly be true. Give it a go. That's the scientific method, I'm told. Give it a go of treating the metta bhavana as prayer to whatever forces for good there are in the universe, and having a bit of faith that we are invoking something, but it's actually having an effect on the person that we're thinking about, and that makes the metta bhavana, it puts it in a different realm to just something that I'm doing from, as it were, for my own benefit. Doing the metta bhavana for our own benefit seems a bit contrary somehow. I mean, if we don't believe that it benefits the other, and it's all about me, how is it a metta bhavana? Anyway, so yes, I'd like to really recommend that approach to the metta bhavana. Okay, so ethics and ethics and meditation. What about wisdom? So we're being given a crash course in reality. We're being given a crash course in Malakshanas. The marks of conditioned existence, impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, and non-self. And Satyajoti talked about that last week. And I did also in a short message that I sent out to the Sangha that Satyajoti sent out. So I'm going to talk about wisdom in slightly different terms. I'm going to talk about it in terms of what are called the 4 reminders, or the 4 reflections that turn the mind to the Dharma. So that's a traditional set of reflections that's used in Tibetan Buddhism to prepare practitioners to engage really wholeheartedly in the Dharma. Practitioners would meditate on these reflections over and over again for some considerable period of time until they became like completely internalized, completely part of the way they thought. Because that was, accepting those truths was seen as a necessary foundation for practicing the Dharma wholeheartedly. And practicing the Dharma wholeheartedly was seen as a necessary foundation for getting anywhere with the Dharma. But that's not, so that would be almost like a preparatory practice, but it's no way a beginner's practice. if we really took on the truths behind these reflections, it would completely transform the way we think and the way we live. Anyway, so what are they? The first of these reflections is usually called This Precious Opportunity. And it involves reflecting that we have at this moment a precious opportunity to practice the Dharma, almost unique opportunity, a very unusual opportunity to practice the Dharma that most people throughout history and most people alive today do not have. So Buddhism is great for lists. Buddhism has loads of lists. But of course, there's a list. There's a list of the conditions necessary to have a real precious opportunity to use life meaningfully and practice the Dharma. So among I think there are 8 on the list. I've got 6 here. We need to be reasonably healthy in mind and body. We don't need to be perfect, but we need to be reasonably healthy in mind and body. We need to live in a civilized land where there is order and cooperation so that we're not just fighting for survival. We need to live at a time and place when the Dharma is available. We need to have been lucky enough to find the Sangha. Most people don't. We need enough wealth and leisure, which doesn't mean we need to be rich, but we need enough wealth and leisure so that all our time isn't taken up just and shelter for ourselves and our dependents. And finally, we need to have accumulated, according to the tradition, enough positive karma to respond positively to the Dharma, to respond with faith to the Dharma. Loads of people hear the Dharma and go, yeah, whatever. But some of us hear the Dharma and go, whoa! And that's deemed traditionally to be down to our previous karma. So most of us, coming along to a Buddhist center and living in a land like Britain, most of us have had this precious opportunity for some considerable time now. Most people throughout history would envy the opportunities we have. Most people living on the planet right now would envy the opportunities we've had. And of course, most of us took it for granted. We took it for granted. We thought it was just the normal way things were, the normal state of things. So maybe we didn't use our precious opportunity quite as wholeheartedly as we could. And I would include myself in that. Maybe we practiced the Dharma in a fairly easygoing sort of way without taking too many risks, making too many sacrifices, not sort of stepping out of our comfort zone too much. Not completely wholeheartedly, but now we're being shown very clearly that that sort of comfortable, safe lifestyle that most of us, not all of us, but most of us have enjoyed, was not the norm. It's not permanent. It's not permanent. It's not guaranteed. In fact, it's very, very fragile, and it's bound to end sometime. So when this epidemic subsides, and hopefully things return to something like normal, although they won't return to the same, they won't return to the same. Hopefully we can have used this situation to gain enough wisdom to remember and appreciate just how precious that opportunity is, and how fragile it is, so that it can't be guaranteed to last, and we need to take advantage of it while we can. And also let's appreciate that we have a precious opportunity right now. So our whole world has changed. All our usual routines have been thrown up in the air. We can't carry on as we have done. And our idea of ourselves is very tied up, our sort of self-image, if you like, it's very tied up with all the routines that we go through, the things we do, the things we like. And those have been sort of shuffled. So that gives us a real opportunity right now, change, transcend, to step out of the old person and step into a new person. And I'll say a bit more about that later. It's an opportunity to transcend our old selves and step into bigger shoes. So then the second mind-turning reflection, the reflection that turns the mind to the Dharma, is the fact of impermanence and the inevitability of death, our own death included. And we're being shown, I think, that very, very clearly, that the lifestyle we probably assumed would carry on was in fact impermanent and bound to change. And some of us are being brought face to face with our own impermanence. So the second reflection is being thrust at us in a very, very hard, harsh way, we could see that as a problem, or we could welcome it. We could welcome it as a wisdom teaching, a lesson in the way things really are. And if we allow this situation to teach us that lesson of impermanence, the reality of impermanence, we'll come out of this as wiser people. And we'll live in a world, and we'll live in a way that's more real and vivid. And then the third of the mind-turning reflections is often just called no happiness in samsara, which sounds terribly sort of negative, but it needs a bit of interpreting. So we could take samsara here to mean a life lived mainly for worldly pleasures and gratifications like passing pleasures, sensory pleasures, status, approval, wealth, and possessions. A normal lifestyle. Saying a normal lifestyle cannot provide permanent happiness. Of course, it can provide some temporary pleasures at a certain level, but this pleasure cannot last. It's subject to impermanence like everything else. And in the end, we get old, we get sick, we die. But even while this worldly happiness, if we get it, which we're not guaranteed by any means, if we get it, even while it lasts, it doesn't satisfy us. It can't satisfy us. It doesn't matter how many holidays we go on, or how many lovely meals we have, or how much sex we get, or how much people praise us, how much people, how much status we've got, how much wealth and possessions we've got, how many clothes, how big a house. We're never going to be really satisfied. Hang around among people who've got everything and ask yourself, are they satisfied? And the answer is no. And we're not satisfied. We're never satisfied with that sort of thing because we're spiritual beings. We have the potential to be so much more than mere consumers. And as long as that potential, that spiritual potential, isn't being developed, somewhere at the back of our awareness, there's a discomfort, there's a sense of lack, there's a nagging lack that comes out as dissatisfaction, anxiety, whatever. But the Dharma tells us there is a much deeper happiness and fulfillment to be found by practicing the Dharma, by growing to become more like the magnificent being we could become. Rising above worldly things, rising above dependence on worldly things, rather than making our happiness and well-being dependent on them when they're completely unpredictable. As we point out in our introductory classes, real happiness comes from inside, not from outer things. And then the final reflection on that turns the mind to the Dharma is the reality of the law of karma. Karma is a reality. The law of karma is simply true. The way we behave now creates the person we become in the future. The person we become in the future determines the sort of world we will experience. It's often talked about in terms of rebirth. It happens here and now as well, in this very life. The way we think and behave now will create the world we experience in the future. If we act unskillfully, we'll be creating more suffering and negative states for ourselves. If we act skillfully, we will create more positive mental states, more happiness. And it's how we use the law of karma that determines how happy or fulfilled we'll be, not how much stuff we have or how much people praise us. And these are times when the law of karma is particularly powerful. There's a word that's used in Tibetan Buddhism, bardo. So a bardo is an in-between state when one reality is, as it were, dissolving and another one hasn't yet formed, congealed. The time between death and rebirth is a bardo, and how we behave in that bardo is seen as particularly important, particularly powerful, profound existence. But we are also in a bardo now. The old order of things has changed. The old order of things has dissolved and a new order has not come into being. We're in a bardo. And bardos are times of great opportunity. They're times when the working of karma is amplified. So if we use this period to act skillfully, to practice more intensely, behave, to be more kindly, generous, to meditate, to reflect, this will have a profound effect. It will be turbocharged. We have this opportunity to really leave behind our old self and become larger beings, to step into a bigger being. And if we do this, if we can do this, and if we can maintain our sense of community as a Sangha, then actually, what terrible as the situation is, something very, very